So we can continue the rest of this meeting with the recording. That's a good suggestion, Dan. We need to follow up. I really wish you'd have some more light in that room because I still see your head burning above that fireplace you have there. Did somebody raise their hand? Did I see somebody wanted to make a comment about that? Apologize for cutting some people off, but we really needed to get as many people asking questions as possible, and some people were going on and on with something that they felt really strongly about. Carrie Lamari, go ahead.
Dan's on to something here, because we've been having an email conversation as to what can we do to get the attention of the county council again, and to have a voice in government. We don't have one today, but he's on to something. When I was on the Mid-County Advisory Board, we had an action group in the Mid-County area as well. I think we should request Mark to reinstate these action groups, and I think we should get some of our members on some of these advisory boards, because let's face it, the YIMBYs and the pro-growthers, they've got the ear of the county council, and they're getting their initiatives and their agendas, at least considered. It doesn't seem like we are. My opinion.
Thank you, Carrie. Ira, do you want to follow up on that?
I wanted to ask Karen and others what they thought of Mark's response about crime. He didn't really seem to address concrete actions that the police could take to lower the crime.
Well, in his opening remarks, he did talk about the need to recruit more police officers, right, and he had to pay more money for that. I mean, right. There is a whole cluster of issues having to do with affordable housing for first responders, for teachers, so they can live in the county. They have to make policing more attractive, and so they're trying to get some people out of high school to think about law enforcement as a career. So there is something. I really wanted him to talk more about sort of interregional conversations that Montgomery's having with Prince George's and having with the District of Columbia. Because what we've heard from the police and other meetings is that there are people who are attracted to downtown Silver Spring in particular because it stays open late, and that DC and Prince George's County, most of their establishments are closed by 2, 3 o'clock at the latest, and we have places that are open at 6. I mean, until 6, and so that's not a good situation. Of course, that doesn't address the situation about the shootouts that take place at 10:30 on a Monday morning.
Right, and I mean, on Saturday there was a letter carrier that was an armed robbery to a letter carrier in Northwood. So there's a problem.
And I mean, there's been several carjackings right around the Wheaton Mall too, and I don't think those have been late at night or anything like that. So I guess in some respects, his answer was fair, because you can put on more police, but you can't, unless you have a police standing every 10 feet or so, that doesn't necessarily solve these things. So the kind of question is, why is everything sort of falling apart? And if it's, some of it's not just our community too, but is it things like, like I say, did everybody kind of lose some social connections and things like that over the last few years or whatever? And
right.
There may be some truth to that. You have to get into the soft side of this. More police will help too, but
Byron, will go to you because I cut you off with that second question.
I want to thank you so much for conducting this wonderful meeting, and I really enjoyed everybody's comments. I just want to make one very brief comment with regard to the I-270 project. What has been overlooked by just about all the political people and just about everybody else is that in the 5 years of doing the deconstruction and then reconstruction of the widening of the I-270 with the adding of the toll lanes, et cetera, there'll be at least about 5 years of a daily generation of what is called silica construction dust, which, according to the National Cancer Institute and OSHA and the American Public Health Association is highly toxic and carcinogenic and will give, I hate to say it this way, but our grandchildren, our children, and all of us asthma, silicosis, COPD, and even lung cancer. And that has been overlooked. It was not addressed adequately in the environmental impact studies, which I laboriously went through on the various draft versions, et cetera. And it's being overlooked in much the same way as the tobacco industry denied and then overlooked and evaded accountability for the does tobacco cause lung cancer? And the executives under oath would raise their hand in front of Congress and say, no, we have no information about that. So I'm here to tell you, all of us with Civic Fed, and tell your neighbors that if this I-270 project were to proceed, we would all, not just those within 2 blocks of the I-270, but a good mile plus east and west of the I-270 would be affected daily with having to breathe silica construction dust, which would be embedded in our lungs and the lungs of our little kids, and we would become a very sick county. And I've even used the expression, we would become known as Cancer County, Maryland. So I know it's not a happy thought, but I wanted to leave you with the reality that it's not just a traffic problem to talk about I-270. It's not just traffic. It would get worse traffic, yes, if it was done that way. But one of the overriding considerations is the public health crisis that would happen to all of us. And so I'm hoping to work with the county and the state. I've made overtures out there already with my background that I would be able to help. And we have to stop the I-270, terrible scheme, including the public health effects. So I wanted to mention that to everybody. So thank you, Alan, for the opportunity to do that at the end here.
There's probably some public health impacts to the Purple Line construction as well, right through our neighborhood. Sue, do you have a question that you'd like to, or a comment you'd like to make?
Yeah, Alan, thank you. There has been some there have been some comments in the chat concerning transparency over the selection of permanent members to the planning board. And I was hoping that we could discuss those. And in that context, I was hoping that there might be someone in this group who would help me to understand the transparency issues regarding the council's movement on its selection of the permanent members. From what I've observed, they haven't been transparent in deciding which members to select and when. I followed this as best I could, and the only thing that they did publicly was resolve to select the temporary members. And at that time, all that President Albornoz indicated was his hope to, at this time, replace 3 members, and at a later date in June, in or about June, replace the planning board chair and 1 other. So as best I can tell, everything else has been done behind closed doors. Is there someone in this Zoom meeting who can explain this to me?
There's a couple of people here could explain that. Tomorrow morning, tomorrow the council is going to interview the Democratic candidates for the planning board.
Oh, I know what's happening. I want to know when the decisions were made publicly as to which ones they would decide to replace.
that was not a public conversation. They interviewed everybody is that true? They put everybody who applied as Republican. There were 2 candidates. They interviewed everybody who applied as an independent, I believe. And it sounded like there wasn't a cut on, maybe Harriet, you know about that, or Liz, Joyce, do you know about that? Whether or not all the Democratic candidates all of them going to be interviewed, or just a select few tomorrow?
I don't know. I think they were trying to be very accommodating. Last week at the unaffiliated interviews, they interviewed one of the Democratic candidates who was not able to be interviewed this week. So I think they're being pretty open about that. What concerns me is what criteria they will use. They haven't been open about what they are looking for. And of course, that is what strikes fear into my heart.
Al Carr said the press release was riddled with errors, so we need to look at that. Liz, you had a question you wanted to ask too, and then Harriet, you can go next.
Yes, I was very interested in, speaking of the crime, because like you, I live near downtown Silver Spring. Both Mark and Kate Stewart, when we heard her in our neighborhood this weekend, were very opaque about what is the reason that the council is so hesitant to pass a law setting a closing date for businesses. We know that you're at your public safety meetings, the commander has said quite clearly that they have to quote unquote babysit downtown Silver Spring between 2 or 3 in the morning and dawn. That not only uses resources, but the big issue is, are these businesses that are open all night attracting the criminals who are, would be otherwise not attracted here because these places are open? And I just don't know what is going on here that they're so hesitant to pass a curfew, which most jurisdictions have no problem with, and something's going on here.
Yeah, I was a little surprised that Mark said that there were members of the council who, did not support, closing, some of these clubs and establishments, before 6 o'clock in the morning. So it's worthwhile to sort of ask questions about that. There is for those who are interested, there is a county council town hall meeting tomorrow, Wednesday, February 15th at 7 p.m. in Gaithersburg. And it looks like it's a hybrid option. So if you can't be there in person, you can watch it on Zoom. Might be an opportunity to ask some questions like that. Harriet Quinn, do you have a comment or question?
Yes, first on the interviews for the planning board. They did not interview all of the Republicans, and they are not interviewing all of the Democrats. I don't know how they selected the ones they would interview, and they haven't revealed that in the past. I know they're saying this is a more transparent process, but I actually find it moving more quickly than it has in the past. We used to have time as the Civic Fed to interview the candidates, the finalists anyway. I don't see that happening. So I don't really, know what's more transparent than before. I had a question for Byron, if he's still on.
Yes.
About 270. If you could just clarify, would the silica be coming from digging up the existing infrastructure, or does it come from installation of the new facilities?
Good question. Can you hear me now? Yeah.
Yes.
All right. The silica construction dust is also known as crystalline silica construction dust, more officially. And it comes primarily from the cutting of the existing concrete. All that material has to be actually cut with, basically just imagine special types of power saws. And OSHA requires all the people using that equipment to have special masks on and to have water to constantly try to control the silica construction dust. It is highly carcinogenic to the workers on site, and much of it will spill into is generated in such a large volume that it cannot be water captured sufficiently with we're talking here about big tanker trucks constantly spraying water, and God knows where that's going to flow to, constantly spraying water as all these many power saws are tearing apart the very thick concrete structures, generating these clouds of toxic silica construction dust. I was going to say, Alan, if possible, I'll send it to you. And also my email is Byron, my name, BYRON, at Auto Safety Expert. That's one word, autosafetyexpert.com. And I will send you gladly the overview of this with the National Cancer Institute and the American Public Health Association report on this. So you will have the factual information. So it's not just me saying it. You'll have the factual support information about this highly toxic material that will give our kids asthma. There's no question about that. The kids exposed to this will get asthma. We will get silicosis and lung cancer. It will be horrific for all of us living within even a couple miles, from the I-270, because this is highly dispersed into our atmosphere. We will breathe it. You'll have to keep the windows of your house closed. You won't be able to walk the dog or go bicycling. It's going to be horrific. So it's a major public health crisis that we are looking at if the I-270 project proceeds as Governor Hogan and Transurban, the Australian company that wants, that is in control of the project. So it's a very sad situation. I'm sorry to be so negative, but if you send me, just ask for the information from me, just very simply, and I'll be happy to send it to you tomorrow. Byron, BYRON, at Auto Safety Expert, which is one word, autosafetyexpert.com. And thank you for your interest.
Thank you.
Thanks, Byron. Anybody else have a question before we quickly go to committee reports? I know that Peggy'd like to say something about legislation. I don't see anybody hands going up. So why don't we quickly, it's 9:43. Let's quickly go to our committee reports. And anybody have anything they want to say about education? Well, I just want to make the observation that I'm really distressed about the anti-Semitism, which is popping up in Montgomery County public schools. You would have thought at the very beginning that it was a spontaneous one-off situation, but it's happening all over the county. It's happening in middle schools. It's happening in high schools. Doesn't sound like it sounds like an organized group. Sounds like, they're using social media to share messaging and to share tactics and strategy. Very, very distressing. I hope that MCPS is on top of it because it seems to be growing like wildfire. Anybody else in education? Next is the environment. Anybody want to say something about environmental issues of concern? I don't see any hands, and everybody's waving wildly. Legislation. Peggy, what would you like to say about legislation?
Yes, well, we have a number of bills that I described and were outlined very well in the newsletter. In the interest of time, since the executive committee has suggested that we should approve them all and support these, I would like to suggest that we just vote them as a package to support. Unless anybody has any, can you hear me?
Yeah, we hear you.
Oh, unless anybody has any questions about specific bills, and then I may or may not be able to answer them. I would certainly consider the bill on the chain of custody for the artificial turf bills. I believe that's HB 299. That one is certainly environmental.
Well, I think we had talked about whether or not we could offer these bills as legislation that the Civic Fed Executive Committee was supported. And
Yes, but then my understanding was that you wanted everybody in attendance to vote on them.
no, that was not what I said at all. I'm sorry, it's not what I said, because we'd have to go through each bill and there would be a debate back and forth about
In fact, Alan, we don't need to go through each bill since they were written up in the newsletter. And if anybody has any questions, now is the time to ask.
do you want to go through the list of bills just for people's edification?
No, if you say we don't need to vote on them, then we'll go by your word.
Anybody have any thoughts about whether or not we should discuss each bill and take a vote on them, or vote on them as a package? Or do you feel comfortable with our recommendation about which bills that the Civic Fed should support? Carrie?
I think for the benefit of everybody, if you could just say, just list them out. 1,
Yeah.
2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and then we can vote. Then I will make a motion now, after she lists them out, that we vote to approve them
Yes,
as a
please.
Civic
Can we
Fed.
do it that way? Yes.
Sure, okay. Peggy?
Okay. First two bills are Senator Kramer's bills, MCPG 105-23. That's the one establishing a Montgomery County Planning Trust and Transparency Act. I don't think I have the second bill number down. It's probably 104-23. We would recommend that we support both of them, and in fact, we have been supporting them. Bill on artificial turf fields, that's Mary Lehman's bill. HB, I think it's 299. Sorry, I don't have the number in front of me. Next, that's the chain of custody bill for artificial turf playing fields. It basically sets up like a database so that every field is known as to where it is, and if it's being decommissioned, where it ends up as an environmental hazard. Of course, the bill doesn't say that, but that's true. HB 0058, the Open Meetings Act for the state's Ethics Commission. That's from our delegate Corman. It expands various open meeting and transparency requirements, including web streaming meetings for the Maryland State Ethics Commission specifically. HB 129, the courts. It's a bill having to do with strategic lawsuits against public participation, and it would rein in what have come to be known as SLAPP suits and make them more difficult for people to bring, particularly against civic activists. We like that one. I would call it the Wayne Goldstein Act. The last one that we're recommending is HB 35. Oh, no, we're not doing that. That's the proof of identity in elections.
But you had also recommended that we support HB 70, Senate Bill 16, Safe Access for All Roads Act.
Oh, yes, I didn't even have that on my list.
And that bill was introduced by Lori Charkoudian and Jeff Wald-Stryker, supported by the Washington Area Bicycle Association, Bike Maryland, the county's Pedestrian, Bicycle, and Traffic Safety Advisory Committee, and even the NTSB.
National Transportation Safety Board.
It's a bill requiring the Department of Transportation to recommend and implement certain design elements for pedestrian and bicycle safety when developing any construction or improvement project or post-construction project preservation or maintenance, and requiring the State Highway Administration to submit certain reports with regard to bike and pedestrian safety. Yeah, that one slipped by. That's a good one, though.
It was in the newsletter, so thank you for reminding us. Yes.
Sure. Liz Joyce?
0.
Yes, I'm wondering if we want to support the Kramer bills, because I suspect they're not going to go forward in those forms because of the letter of intent that we were talking about earlier. In other words, I assume they're not going to be active proposals, given that they've reached a different solution.
I think transparency bill goes forward with its the same number, and I don't know if he withdrew the task force bill and didn't have any support in the council or very much in the delegation. So
The first bill on the task force was voted down by the committee based on the agreement that they're going to have the meeting that Mark Elrich was discussing. So that's already been killed. But the second bill was amended by the committee, and that bill is still on track for passage.
And we
Yes,
want to
it's
thank
a-
you, Jerry Garson, for going to Annapolis and advocating
Yes.
on our behalf for those original Kramer bills. So thank you very much for doing that. So those are the bills. They're printed in the newsletter on page 16 and 17. Jerry, did you want to make that motion?
Yeah, the motion is to, support those bills. Thank you.
As recommended by the executive committee. Is there a second?
Second,
It's been first and second. Is there any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Abstentions? The motion carries. Thank you, Peggy, and thank you, Carrie Lamari.
Alan, real quick, who was the second?
me, Liz.
Liz, okay, great, thank you.
Okay,
This is Jerry. I'll be testifying remotely on HB 299 on Wednesday.
that's the synthetic turf chain of custody, which we feel very strongly about. Ira, I see your hand is up.
Yeah, thanks. I wanted to respond to the rising anti-Semitism. So I've been working for the last few months on getting the county to support more cameras on sites that would proactively identify people putting up the graffiti and be able to identify them so that we could put more supervision on those people and prevent, later crimes, that are much worse than graffiti.
Thank you. I know the county's has been doing this for the last couple of years, right? They've been putting more.
Well,
and more
they've been putting cameras in houses of worship, but not for the purpose of identifying, vandalism and graffiti. That would be something new, because every time they have these crimes, they look at businesses and homes for camera surveillance footage, and they never find any because they're not set up that way. So it's kind of a new thing. Anyway, I just wanted to fill you in on what some people are trying to do to deal with the rising anti-Semitism.
keep us posted. There's rising racism too, and misogyny. It's a terrible time.
Right, and they often go together.
Yeah. Planning and land use. Anybody want to offer additional comments about planning and land use issues? We've talked a lot about MNC PPC, the planning board process. I saw that Diane Cameron, she's still here, and she was able to report that the Montgomery Village Foundation has taken a position against M83. So I know that makes her heart sore. That's also a position of the Civic Fed. Anybody else in planning and land use?
I just want to say we need to pay very close attention to what the council is doing. Not, as Mark said, that there's a lot we can do about it, and also we might want to have a strategy about, how and when to express our views, because I've noticed that the buzzword that they're all using, messaging, is very important, and every other word is transparency, while they're devoting themselves, from what I can see, to continuing their lack of transparency. So let's just keep their feet to the fire to the extent that we can, and pay attention to what they're doing and communicate that with one another and see if there's anything we can do.
I'd like to think that Council President Evan Glass is more of an advocate for transparency than we've seen in a long time. And we should ask him those questions about how the planning board finalists were selected and what criteria did they use.
Yes.
The next,
Also, Alan,
yeah,
also, if the Civic Fed wants to advocate again for the People's Council funding, now is the time to send a letter to the council and to the county executive because it's budget time right now. So I don't think you have to vote on that because it's already a position.
Thank you, Harriet. That's great.
Yeah, we will do that. I'm going to go to just a couple more committees, public safety. We talked a little bit
Wait a
about-
second.
Wait,
a second,
Carrie.
Alan.
Well, we talked a little bit about public safety in downtown Silver Spring, and there's an interesting article in Adam Pagnucco's newsletter, Montgomery Perspective, on he summarizes some of the conclusions that are in a packet that went to the Public Safety Committee that talks about police recruitment, police requirement, and their inability to do some core police functions because they just don't have the people. There's not enough people in the 911 system. So calls for service are not responded as quickly as they should. It's a very dire situation. I posted his article on the Civic Federation Facebook page and on the Safe Silver Spring page. So it's worth a read. It's not a good situation. Anybody got suggestions about how we recruit more people from our community to be on Montgomery County Police Department? Raise your hand, speak up, send them a note because it's a dire situation. They said that pre-pandemic, the average rate of attrition is that one officer would resign per month. That's sort of the average over the year. And now it's 4 per month. And so it's a pretty drastic change in circumstances. So there's that. Public finance, transportation. Jerry, anything about transportation?
The purple line is delayed again. It was supposed to open last year. They're now saying it might open in 2027. But they're doing some work from my own observations, but not at a very rapid speed. And I wrote an article, but somehow it never got in the newsletter. But the purple line has been going on for 25 years.
And I've been
traffic patterns and transportation patterns have changed.
I've been involved in that since the very beginning when we first went to a meeting at College Park on this purple line. I just saw infographic from the Martin O'Malley administration saying that it was expected to be completed in 2020. And Jerry's right, 2027 if we're lucky. So it's very disruptive. Peggy, are you raising your hand?
Yes, I am. I wanted to reiterate your call in the newsletter for nominations committee and awards committee volunteers. I volunteered to serve on both. I'll share them if necessary. These should have been up and going several months ago. Get busy very fast. So please join me. Is that okay, Alan?
Well, that's fine. That's fine. We have a couple other committees, utilities. Anybody have one thing they want to offer about utilities? I don't see any hands waving wildly. Anybody else as we come? It's 9:59. Anybody else have anything they'd like to say for the good of the order?
Motion to adjourn.
Sheldon, ask me separately, please, so I don't have to deal with that right now. Okay. I don't see anybody raising their hand. So thank you, everybody, for joining our February meeting of the Civic Federation. Stay tuned for our March newsletter and our exciting March program. And if anybody wants to have anything printed in our newsletter, it's available for you to disseminate information. So just email it to me or any members of the executive board.
Alan, what's the March program? What's the topic?
Affordable housing.
Oh, okay.
I had skipped over that because I did not remember. So thank you, Jackie, and thank you, Karen, and thank you, everybody, for joining us this evening. Motion to adjourn, yes?
Yes.
Been moved and seconded. All those in favor say aye. Good night,
Aye.
everybody.
Good night.
Right.